Time for a little Thunder cover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans' Darnell Mayberry. What's up, Darnell?
What's going on,
guys? Not much. So is that why you said originally whenever we first asked you about this series, you said you were torn, either Spurs in 6 or Heat in 7? I think you might be a genius because I think I'm starting to understand what you were talking about.
Yeah, what a great game last night. I mean, the Spurs were up, with what, 12, 15 seconds left. And, Miami just made some great plays. And it's going to be interesting to see if the Spurs can bounce back after losing that game the way they did last night. I think it's going to make for a great Game 7. And man, what a Game 6. I just think the Spurs had it, and they lost it. And who knows if they're going to be able to bounce back after that.
I don't think they're going to be able to bounce back personally. I think it was too much. I think it was right there within their grasp. Kind of they gave it all or nothing effort right there. They thought they had it. And I just don't know if they can recover mentally from being that close and having it ripped away. Physically, it was a physical game. Tim Duncan, a lot of minutes. Tony Parker was exhausted after the game.
Got the hammy still.
I just don't know that they can recover the mindset, the intensity level. That place is having, in the Heat, having been so close to having it ripped away from them, being standing right there with the trophy on the sidelines about to be given to someone else. I think the emotion for them coming back in Game 7, I think the fans, the atmosphere is going to be unbelievable because they were all right there with them, thought the season was over, and now you get a second chance. And I don't think, typically you can't give, especially a returning champion, you can't give them a second chance. I think the Spurs are done. I think the Heat probably win Game 7 running away.
I don't see a blowout happening, but I will say that it's going to take a lot for the Spurs, a lot to go right for the Spurs to win Game 7 in Miami. And they've had a lot go right and go well for them in this series. And, last night, even though some of the role players struggled, I thought whoever role player stepped up most would win Game 6. And sure enough, you see Gary Neal and Boris Diaw and Danny Green combined to go 5 for 20, and I think that contributed to that loss. So they're going to need those guys again in Game 7. They gotta find their rhythm. And then Manu Ginobili, he had an off night. So if they can get those same performances that they've been getting in the games that they've won, they have a shot to win Game 7. And if anybody can do it, I'd say the Spurs can. But it's going to be awfully tough.
Talk about Jekyll and Hyde. Manu Ginobili, with what he gave you Game 5 to Game 6, 8 turnovers and only 9 points. He was awful. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He was not good. On the other side of that Jekyll and Hyde, Mario Chalmers, we talked about him. He was big last night, 7-11, and he chipped in 20 points. You mentioned at the top what a great game it was, and it was. Since you've been covering basketball, where does that rank for you, Darnell, from the implications of it being the NBA Finals, a closeout game with the legacies of LeBron James, Tim Duncan, and everyone else surrounding it, everything that encompassed in that game there at the end, where does that rank for you all time?
Best game I've seen in terms of the magnitude of, what it means and the star players that you have for both teams, the legacies on the line, like you said. Best game I've seen, hands down. I don't think it's close. There have been quality regular season games. There even been great playoff games. I mean, I'm reminded of the triple overtime game. What was it, 2 years ago? The Thunder played against the Grizzlies, but that was in the second round. This is the NBA Finals. This is a Game 6, a potential closeout game. The Heat down at home, the trophy's out there. They're getting ready to lose it in their home arena, and then all of a sudden
crowds filtering out like cockroaches.
They're fouling out of the arena, and then they storm back up the steps trying to get back in. So you just think it's over, and then all of a sudden, big shot after big shot, big time defense, and here we talking about a Game 7 now.
Did you have a most memorable play from that game? Because there were so many of them. Mike Miller hits the three without a shoe. Ray Allen step back three right there at the end of regulation. LeBron hit a big one as well. Tony Parker there whenever it looked like the Spurs were going to be out of the thing there late in the fourth quarter. Tony Parker, a great couple of plays there, gets a steal, hits the big three, makes another layup. I mean, there's so many plays there. Bosch's block at the end. LeBron James's block of Tim Duncan there, and then runs the floor and gets the points in transition. What's the most memorable play from that game for you?
Had to be Ray Allen's three-pointer. The way he caught it, stepped back, and I don't know how many people have had the fortune of stepping on an NBA court, but there's not a lot of room. Any court, there's not a lot of room on that sideline in the corner with that three-pointer. So his foot could have easily been out of bounds, and his toes easily could have been on the line. But just great awareness by Ray Allen to catch it, step back, and make sure that he was behind the line and get the shot off and make it. So just an incredible play.
So many things encompassing this game. We'll get to coaching, questioning Greg Popovich, the great Greg Popovich, on his decision not to have Tim Duncan, Tony Parker in at crucial moments. The refereeing, did they make mistakes? LeBron James's fourth quarter performance. A lot of things encompassing last night's game. It was just absolutely phenomenal. We'll get to that and more. This is Thunder Cover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans' Darnell Mayberry. Quick break from here in Pauls Valley at Seth Wadley Ford, Oklahoma's Ford Truck King. It's The Rush, and you're listening to the Sports Talk Network. 17 minutes past the hour, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Wednesday, June 19th. Dusty Dvorak, Teddy Lehman, your host. We're in Pauls Valley today. Seth Wadley Ford, Oklahoma's Ford Truck King, I-35 and Exit 72. Good old boys making good old deals. Just a short country drive from wherever you may be. Hundreds of trucks on the lot ready to go today. Brian McCray and the staff are excellent. Going to make you a great deal today on a new or a used truck right here at Seth Wadley Ford in Pauls Valley, I-35 and Exit 72.
This hour brought to you by the Riverwind Casino and Hotel, located just south of Norman off of Highway 9 and I-35. 219,000 square feet, over 2,700 electronic games, 30 table games, a poker room open 24/7, off-track betting, and a high-limits room. Restaurants include the Willows Buffet and Chips and Ale. For concert and comedy show reservations, give them a call, 1-877-787-9637.
Let's get back to Thunder Cover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans' Darnell Mayberry. Not much Thunder talk today with a game like last night and a Game 7 coming tomorrow. It's hard not to talk about it. Last night, Darnell, did the Spurs lose it or did the Heat win it?
Heat won it. I think in society today especially, everyone wants to point the finger and have someone to blame. Let's give the Miami Heat credit. They played a heck of a game down the stretch. LeBron was incredible in the fourth quarter and overtime, and they stormed back and took that game. So I prefer to give Miami credit and not say the Spurs blew that game.
A lot of people, some people claiming NBA conspiracy theory that, of course, there's going to be a Game 7. The NBA wouldn't have it any other way. Some of the officiating late. There should have been a call on Ginobili, should have been a call possibly on Danny Green. Did you see any of that? I thought personally that the game was called pretty good.
Yeah, I think for the most part they let the guys play unless it was just something totally obvious that had to be called. And there was a couple that were missed, but, they're humans. They make mistakes just like we all do. So I didn't have too much of a problem with the officiating. I definitely don't think that the NBA in any kind of conspiracy type of way was behind this game going to Game 7. David Stern couldn't will that, as powerful as he is, he couldn't will that Ray Allen three-pointer in. And that was just a great, great shot by Ray Allen to send that game in overtime.
That's exactly right. You can say whatever you want about the officiating. In the end, Ray Allen made that three. LeBron James made the three the possession before that. David Stern had nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I guess my thing is kind of like we even saw in the Super Bowl. They're late, that last play, fourth down, the San Francisco 49ers right there in the end zone. Was it pass interference in the end zone? Maybe. I don't know. But you're talking about determining, a champion of a sport. You're talking about a championship. And if it's questionable in any way, I want the referee, I want the, whatever, umpire, referee, whatever sport it is, I want him to swallow his whistle. I want the players to determine the outcome of the game, not an official.
I'm totally with you. I think the refs did a great job of letting the players determine the outcome of the game last night. And hopefully, whichever crew gets assigned to Game 7, we'll see the same thing. I think this needs to be one of those throwback type of, 70s, 80s games where they just let them play, let it get physical, whatever happens, happens. Keep it clean, but just let them play and let the players decide the outcome.
Here's what really matters, though, Darnell. If you're LeBron James going into Game 7, are you going with the headband or without the headband?
He's already come out and said he's going with it. I don't understand that.
I don't
he
know
played
either.
great without it.
I think what he's going to do is
burning that damn thing.
I think he's building up the hype around it. I think he's going to, if they fall behind or anything, he's going to come out maybe second half with the headband off or something during a timeout, throw it off, get the crowd into it because everyone's going to be waiting for. It's like Lincoln Hawk whenever he takes the hat and flips it around backwards.
It's like a switch.
It's a switch that goes off.
Yeah, you know what, LeBron, I don't understand the logic there. He left it off clearly for a reason in the fourth quarter and overtime after he got knocked off. So I don't see why not just stick with what was working. It seems like maybe he's not a superstitious guy. I don't know, but it seems like it was a no-brainer to just go without it to me.
I'm with you 100%. I am a superstitious guy. This is Thundercover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans. Darnell Mayberry. Darnell, so oftentimes we praise Greg Popovich. Everyone does. Every media outlet's always praising Greg Popovich. Well, last night, Tim Duncan not in there late in situations. Obviously, the Ray Allen three is a second chance point. Chris Bosh gets the rebound, kicks it out to him, enables him to get the three. Greg Popovich has Tim Duncan on the bench. They're late the last couple possessions. Tony Parker not in the game. He's over on the bench. Should we be questioning Greg Popovich and the way he utilized his roster last night?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's fair to question him. I don't think it's fair to say that cost them the game. They got the stops they wanted. They didn't get the rebounds, but they were in position both times. If you look at that first one, Kawhi Leonard had his hand on the ball. Dwayne Wade made a great hustle play coming over and swatting that ball away and letting it get out to LeBron eventually for that first three. So I can't fault Greg Popovich and say he cost him the game, but, I definitely would question him and say, why didn't you have Tim Duncan in there?
How do you feel at the end of game whenever a team is up three? Do you foul there?
I do. Just too many times it seems like when coaches don't do it, it ends up burning them. And not all the time. It just seems like of course we remember those times where it does cost a team and the opponent makes a three-pointer. But it just seems like you always say, whenever you're watching a game, if you're watching it with a buddy or whoever, you'll say, do you foul here? Do you not foul? And sure enough, one person will say one thing, the other will say something else. So imagine what's going on NBA benches. But it just seems like too many times teams make that three-pointer and put you in a position that you don't want to be in or that you could have avoided. So I think you should foul. And I think the numbers, people have done studies on it, I think the numbers basically say it's about equal. Either way, whether you foul or you don't, it's about equal statistically. So, but I would just give myself a chance to not put myself in a position where they're going to tie up the game on three-pointer.
College basketball always a situation. You see that time and time again. Rules a little different in college basketball, but we see that all the time. Tim Duncan last night, we were talking a lot of heat here, but the San Antonio Spurs, Tim Duncan was special in that first half, Darnell. 25 points. It was like throwback Tim Duncan. It was like Tim Duncan his first 5 years in the NBA, MVP style Tim Duncan. He was special, 25 points, but then he ran out of gas in the second half, just 5 points in second half and overtime. With that old Tim Duncan, one night's rest, is he going to be able to come back in that Game 7 and duplicate in any way, shape, or form that first half performance?
That's one of those things that's got to go well for the Spurs. You look at what he did in that first half, and that was, as you said, it was vintage Tim Duncan. So can he do that again? Because the Spurs are going to need that and more from him and his role players, his teammates. So it's just going to be tough for San Antonio because so much has to go well, and I think that includes Tim Duncan taking advantage of Chris Bosh and Udonis Haslem and Birdman in the post. If he can do that, he'll give the Spurs a chance to win. But if he can't, it could be a tough night.
You also got to give the Heat credit for their perimeter defense. A lot more intensity out there around the perimeter. Danny Green, a guy who's been kind of carrying the Spurs, hitting a lot of big-time shots down the stretch. He didn't have any room almost the entire game, got very few opportunities to hoist those three-pointers that have been so deadly. You got to give the Heat credit. Do you think they're going to continue with that type of game plan against Danny Green?
Yeah, they played him well, but he still got a few opportunities, as you said, not many, but the ones that he had, he just missed those shots, and those are the same shots that he was making throughout this entire series. So he's got to get back to making shots. And, again, that's one of those things that just has to go well for the Spurs because if, just like that, guys can get cold. As hot as he's been in this series, historically hot, he can lose his stroke and his confidence in a split second. So if he's not able to make shots, the Spurs are in trouble because they need those guys to step up. When you're seeing LeBron on Tony Parker struggled with his shot even though he hit some miraculous shots last night. 6 of 23 from the field is not a Tony Parker type game. So they're going to need Gary Neal and Boris Diaw and Gary Neal. Kawhi Leonard played a great game. Tim Duncan played a great game, but they're going to need some help.
You just wonder if that hamstring, as these games wind on, as we saw last night, if that's really hampered him, if all those minutes he played, if that's going to carry over. All right, who you like tomorrow night? South Beach, Game 7, NBA championship on the line. Who wins?
I'm leaning toward the Heat. I think the Heat will win it, but I would not be surprised if the Spurs showed that championship medal and really why they're the Spurs, because they have a way of just withstanding all kinds of obstacles, whether it's injuries, whether it's foul trouble, whether it's a road crowd, a hostile environment. That stuff doesn't really seem to bother them. So if anybody could do it, I'd say the Spurs. But obviously, I think the advantage is with the Heat, and I'm going to say that they'll probably pull it out in 7. All of that to say, guys, I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, I think that's well said there. But if the Spurs do pull it off, what's it going to be because of? Is it going to be because Ginobili finally shows up, Danny Green gets back to the form he was in early in the season, Tim Duncan has another big game? What's going to be the catalyst if the Spurs do in fact win?
I think the big three of Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and Tim Duncan will all have good games. I think that Gary Neal and Danny Green will make big shots. And I think they'll have good ball security. They won't turn it over, allowing Miami to get easy buckets. If they do those three things, I think that'll give them a chance to win.
Guys, points per game average, LeBron James in Game 7s and closeout situations, one of the best of all time.
Yep.
If not the best. That's even ahead of the great Michael Jordan. So you got to expect what we saw in the fourth quarter. I expect more of that from LeBron James tomorrow night.
Who you guys going with?
I got the Heat, man. I had the Heat in 7 from the start of this thing. As much as I think mentally with a guy like Tim Duncan, that big three for San Antonio, if that plays much of a role into it. But I think a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who we saw last night on the free throw line, you can't tell me when Kawhi Leonard was on the free throw line there late, he didn't have things going through his head. Danny Green, the same thing. We saw him not as good. Gary Neal, kind of like we saw Gary Neal, this crew last year in the Western Conference Finals, their first time in that moment. Seemed like the moment was too big for him. I wonder in this Game 7 on the road if that moment's too big for these role players for the Spurs, and also the physical fatigue. I think Tim Duncan, long in the tooth, one-day layoff. He played a ton of minutes for him last night. I don't think he's near as good. And I think Manu Ginobili is what Manu Ginobili is. And I don't know about Tony Parker's hamstring. All that being said, I expect a good game, but I think the Heat ultimately win this thing.
I think the Heat win it handily. When I say handily, I don't think there's going to be down the stretch, the Heat are going to have the game in control. There's not going to be – I don't think it's going to be as tight. I don't see any way that it doesn't – I know the Spurs have tons of championship experience. I know they've got guys that have been there before. But you can't tell me to go out there and have it right there in front of you. They're sitting there right now, in my opinion, saying, we had our chance. We had it right there. That was our chance to win this thing. I don't think they regroup. They're going to go out there and give a good effort. Of course, they're professionals. They're talented players. They're coached well. They're going to go out there and give a great effort. But I just think the Heat control the game.
I will say this, though. If there's anything that this series has told us, fellas, if there's anything.
You can't take anything from one game to the next.
That's exactly right.
That's true.
That's the one thing we know is a constant.
Yeah, and the other thing is, with the exception of Game 1 and Game 6, they've all been double-digit games. So like Teddy's saying, he thinks it's going to be, he didn't say blowout, but thinks the Heat are going to win handily. All these games, 2 through 5, were decided by at least 10 points. So, who knows? It could be very well what Teddy is saying. So, but I'd just be surprised if we see a high-scoring game. I'd be surprised if it's a double-digit margin, just because I think these two teams will really battle it out in the Game 7, and I think it's going to be real physical. I think it's going to be tough to score. I think it's going to be a close game.
If there's a coach and a cast of characters that can kind of overcome that, I think it is the San Antonio Spurs team. So we'll see tomorrow night. Hey, real quickly, Darnell, is there any update whatsoever on replacing Mo Cheeks? Or let me just ask you, when do you think that process might take place?
I'd be surprised if we see anything before July. I think they want to take their time and make sure they go through some interviews and get some guys in here. So no real update right now, but, I don't think that's going to come down for a while.
This is Thundercover, brought to you Thundercover with NewsOK.com and the Oklahomans. Darnell Mayberry. Thanks, Darnell. Great stuff, man.
All right, guys.
31 minutes past the hour. It's a Wednesday, final hour. We're here at Seth Wadley Ford in Pauls Valley. It's The Rush, Sports Talk Network.